Ever had your defect rate explode because you threw 5 new developers onto a late project? You are 2 weeks behind, the sponsor is breathing down your neck, and you do the logical thing by authorizing overtime and adding 5 new bodies to the team. But instead of speeding up, progress completely halts as the new arrivals overwrite code and break the build. Suddenly, your quality assurance team reports a 20% spike in critical bugs, meaning you spent thousands of dollars to make the project later and significantly worse. PM Panda here, 2.5 decades delivering projects, PMP certified since 2003. The mistake I am about to show you is how budgets really die when we panic about time. I have seen teams celebrate being on schedule while the bank account bled out because they did not understand the true cost of schedule compression. Today, we are going to look at why crashing a project is a high-stakes gamble that often results in diminishing returns and catastrophic quality failures if you do not manage the math perfectly. In professional certification exams, we call this specific technique crashing. Crashing is a schedule compression method where you throw additional resources at the critical path without changing the project's scope. The goal is simple: shorten the timeline by spending more money, usually through overtime or hiring contractors. However, adding resources to a late project almost always results in a significantly increased cost baseline without a guaranteed return on that investment. The reason this fails so often is a fundamental rule called the Law of Diminishing Returns. This principle states that adding one factor, like new staff, while keeping other factors fixed will eventually yield progressively smaller increases in output. In project management, this happens because of onboarding time and coordination overhead. If you have 10 people trying to paint one small room, they spend more time dodging each other than actually applying paint to the walls. Compressing the schedule inherently increases your project's risk profile because you are trading stability for speed. When you hastily add inexperienced staff to a complex task, communication errors multiply and quality drops almost immediately. This reactionary approach directly violates the core principle of embedding quality into your processes. In my 25 years in the trenches, I have seen that throwing bodies at complex tasks usually just multiplies your communication errors and creates more work later. Let's look at a global tech launch for a mobile banking app in Tokyo to see this in action. The project manager was running 3 weeks behind on a critical payment gateway integration and decided to crash the schedule by bringing in 5 expensive contractors. This was the critical path, so the logic seemed sound on paper. However, the original lead developers now had to spend 50% of their day explaining the architecture to the newcomers instead of actually coding. The results were a textbook example of the law of diminishing returns in a high-pressure environment. The new developers, rushing to show value before the deadline, bypassed standard quality assurance protocols to keep up. The launch technically happened on time, but that 20% spike in bugs caused a massive payment outage on day 1. They hit the date, but the reputational damage and the cost to fix the live environment far exceeded the cost of the original delay. If the project manager had recognized the risk early on, they might have used fast tracking instead. Fast tracking involves running tasks in parallel that were originally planned in sequence, which carries its own rework risk, but does not necessarily spike the budget. Another option would have been negotiating a scope reduction to protect the core features. Instead, they chose the most expensive and risky path available because they were blinded by the calendar. Here's what most people get wrong after my years of watching these disasters. The biggest mistake is crashing non-critical activities. If you spend your budget to add resources to tasks that have total float, you are burning money for no reason. This increases your costs, but does absolutely zero to shorten the overall project duration. You must ensure the task is actually on the critical path before you even think about opening the checkbook. The second major error is ignoring the onboarding tax during your calculations. Most managers assume a new resource is 100% productive on day 1, which is total nonsense. You must account for the time it takes your existing team to train them and integrate their work into the project. If you ignore this, you will find that your existing high performers slow down just when you need them to be at their fastest. To wrap this up, remember that crashing reduces your schedule duration, but usually guarantees an increase in your project costs. The law of diminishing returns dictates that simply adding people will eventually reduce your overall output efficiency due to complexity. Finally, rushing critical path activities inherently spikes your risk profile and defect rates. If you ignore the quality trade-off, you might deliver a product on time that nobody can actually use. Your actionable next step is simple. Before authorizing any new resources for a delayed task today, calculate the exact onboarding hours required for the team. Then, mathematically verify that the task is actually on the critical path using your network diagram. If this breakdown helped you navigate your project hurdles, hit like so I know to make more. Subscribe if you want practitioner lessons every single week.